unity, a common ethos, discipline, and shared values under beyond aid.
Hello, welcome to the issues with me, Irbad Ibrahim, and today we are going to discuss a very Hello, good day, Ghana. You're welcome to the issues, and today we are going to discuss a very important topic. Yesterday, the banking sector was convulsed by a groundbreaking announcement by the governor of the Bank of Ghana that 5 banks have had their licenses revoked, and then they are going to form a merger that will be called the Consolidated Bank Limited of the Republic of Ghana. And to help us internalize such a fast-moving event is a colossus in this area, Professor Kletos Dodono, an economist, chairperson and CEO of Clay Consult. Sir, you're welcome.
Thank you.
We will soon go for an insight of the press conference that was held by the Bank of Ghana, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, announcing such a seismic shift in our banking regulation. So we go for that insight shortly. Okay, so we'll be
updated in 2016, identified a few indigenous banks as vulnerable with inadequate capital, high levels of non-performing loans, and weak corporate governance. The official administrator appointed for Unibank in March 2018 has found that the bank is beyond rehabilitation. Shareholders, related and connected parties had taken amounts totaling 3.7 billion cedis, which were neither granted through the normal credit delivery process. In the case of Royal Bank, an on-site examination conducted by the Bank of Ghana on 31st March 2018 revealed a number of irregularities. Its non-performing loans constituted 78.8% of loans granted, owing to poor credit risk and liquidity risk management controls. In the case of Sovereign Bank Limited, as part of Bank of Ghana's investigations into the failure of Capital Bank Limited, currently in receivership, it emerged that Sovereign Bank's license was obtained by false pretenses through the use of suspicious and non-existent capital. The bank is insolvent and unable to meet daily liquidity obligations falling due. Beach Bank and Construction Bank were each granted provisional licenses in 2016 and launched in 2017. Subsequent investigations conducted by the Bank of Ghana revealed that, similar to the case of Sovereign Bank, both banks obtained their banking licenses under false pretenses using suspicious and non-existent capital, which has resulted in a situation in which their reported capital is inaccessible to them for their operations. The Bank of Ghana is consolidating the good assets and liabilities of Unibank Ghana Limited, the Royal Bank Limited, the Beige Bank Limited, Sovereign Bank Limited, and the Construction Bank Limited to become the Consolidated Bank.
You're welcome back to I have to my immediate right, just as I introduced him, Professor Kletos Dodono. Prof, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we've been joined by Reverend Dr. Sam Wolanyo Mensah. He's a chartered economist. Sir, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And Prof, for many people, a third world country whose economy is quite fledgling, you would want to throw your weight behind indigenous banks. These 5, if we collect and consider them individually, would be the number 7 of the banks we have dissolved in the past few months. Does this not come to you as a surprise?
Well, it's surprise, yes, It's saddening, but it's also very heartwarming. Saddening because we thought we are riding very smoothly as far as the financial sector and linked to the industrial sector are doing. But not knowing there is a high level of rotten practices there, and getting to dig these things up. It's good that we find that these are the rots that we have, and we have to clean them up. So to me, it's both saddening and also good news to know that we have this situation. Coming to grips with the issues, first and foremost, banking today is not about profit again, alone. Banking is about relationship, it's about knowledge. Then, as a business enterprise, definitely they have to make profit. And this requires a whole lot of things, not only in Ghana. If we look at Basel II, it is important to note that this minimum capital requirement is a must. And there are methods through which they do the calculation, given the level of the economy, the market structure, and the nature of the assets that are out there. So if we are given a minimum of 400 million Ghana cedis, and when you pull 5 banks together, before you are even seeing them coming up, it means pre that time there was high level of capital inadequacy, very high level.
But Prof, for an economy, and I'll soon get to you, Doc, for an economy that is not expansive enough, in 2009, the minimum capital requirement was 60 million Ghana cedis. Less than a decade down the line, you've increased that to manifold. Isn't that too much for the financial institutions to bear?
If you use the relativities, it's the same. If you anchor it into the exchange rate, it's about the same. So, you know, as an economy grows, and we are registering growth, it means that we need more investment. Private industries have to live up to expectations, higher level of cash, and we are a heavy importing country. We import more, so we always run a deficit on our external account. So plus the other effect on the exchange rate, it has depreciated. Today I think the exchange rate is about 4.86 in some segments of the economy. If you use just back of the envelope calculation, the 400 is similar to whatever. You know, since 1988, when Basel I came, and all those important requirements were there, it was far lower. But when you look at today, they still have, and Bank of Ghana does a good job in terms of trying to know what will be the minimum. It's just about the capital adequacy requirement that you have to meet.
Okay, Prof, I'll come back to you shortly. Doc, would you say the Bank of Ghana as a regulator is being a bit too harsh?
Well, thank you very much. I think this call for a greater concern in the sense that looking at the various school of thoughts,
yes, sir,
and taking the economies of scale into consideration, you realize that this is far below the belt because you realize that the Bank of Ghana equally needs to be blamed for lack
How
of
so?
Supervision. Because when you look at the document very well, some have forged documents. The documents were forged in order to get license to operate not as a Susu collecting group, but as a commercial bank in Ghana. So this is a great indictment that we are not serious. Now, how come the officials of Bank of Ghana can sit down for all this while and be able to give a gazette a whole company and give them license to operate as a commercial bank without doing due diligence to the processes and procedures involved?
Yes, yes.
So I strongly believe that the directors and managers of these commercial banks, together with some officials of the Bank of Ghana, needs to be picked by BNI. And
so you suspect collusion?
Exactly. There has been that kind of attitude, and which I don't think by now we should be seeing what we are seeing now. So action must be taken, people needs to be picked, and the law needs to take its rigorous effect. And when you look at the whole scenario, you also realize that it's not just about minimum capital requirement, as Bank of Ghana is professing, because our problems is not just about raising money, it's managerial ethics. We have a big challenge about corporate governance issues and lack of effective and efficient utilization of resources. So you see that even at a point in time, resources are underutilized or overutilized. So we are not being able to integrate the economy, because now when you look at the other models, countries have developed, no country in the world has developed without developing the local economy. And when you look at countries like USA, Japan, Germany, even South Africa, they have developed based on the background of the local economy. We need to develop the local infant industries to grow. But if this is the way, when we give support for our local industries and this is the output that they are going to give to our motherland, then I'm afraid we have a long way to go. So I think the issue is not just about raising minimum capital requirement, but equally managerial issues. We have a leadership crisis in Ghana. So at the end of the day, we'll be laughing at the wrong side of our mouth, because there is a saying that the jaw can never rest until whatever that is in the mouth is exhausted. So we need to stop behaving as if we are self-sufficient. No. The moment we say we are moving away from aid to trade, then we need to be serious. We need to take the bull by the horn and call a big a spoon a spoon and not a big spoon.
Not a big spoon.
Yes, so that is the attitude that kind of sycophancy that we have entertained for all these years must come to an end.
Prof, we shall take the justification the governor of the Bank of Ghana gave in the case of each bank. He said in the case of Royal Bank, an on-site examination conducted by the Bank of Ghana on 31st March this year revealed a number of irregularities. Its non-performance loans consisted of 78.8% of the total loans granted. What does this mean to this a layperson who is watching us now? And how does it warrant such a radical response from the BOG?
That is the Royal Bank, where they have 78.9% of their total loans granted, which are non-performing. In other words, it's not active, and so there is a likelihood of loss.
So is this a quantum it has given out to its clients, and they are not solvent enough to pay back?
Well, let me take it this way. If banks are about mobilizing money and advancing money. They borrow money and they advance credit, or they lend to the needy people. That is basically. If about, let's call it 79% of that money becomes non-performing, it means the bank is gone. It doesn't exist, because the assets must be linked to the credit they create. and taking into consideration the key risks. There are many risks. I would like to dwell with two important risks. What is the degree of exposure of this? You see that maybe one or two people got that money and maybe their businesses collapse. It can be credit risk. They are not able to pay back. And that is very much, in fact, it is the bane of Ghanaians. They borrow money, they don't want to pay back. And then it can also be interest rate risk. The interest on the loan they obtained may be very, very high, and therefore the interest payments, and if it is compounded, it means that once you don't pay, then the interest begins to elicit interest in a compound form. That is why I said that banking is no longer about profit alone. It is also about the relationship and knowledge. The knowledge is what Reverend is referring to as the skills, the administrative capacity to manage. If you recall, some of the people in the banking industries, they don't have PhD. They say they have PhD. That is fraud. What about the professional aspect? Two issues are involved now. We have the professional and then the crime or the security aspects. We'll come to the security. Reverend has made references to some of them. When you have a position of regulation, where I'm coming from, you must ensure that you are able to get the personnel. And that they have money. But if you read this statement, which is very saddening, about one of them, they obtained their banking licenses under false pretenses through the use of suspicious and non-existent capital.
That was in the case of Sovereign Bank.
Then the Beach Bank,
as well as Construction Bank.
Construction Bank. And this is the trial of the five.
Okay, Prof, we'll come back. Won't you hold brief, Doctor, for Royal Bank? Because in the lead up to this, we saw newspaper reports of Royal Bank reminding people who were indebted to it to come and pay. Do you consider a bad debt or a bad loan civil and not criminal? So these banks could have gone for these monies to put them in good standing?
Thank you very much. I think it's a great indictment on the leadership, simply because almost 80% of your loans cannot be recovered. And that's a total failure.
So how do you, what punitive measure is there, apart from debt collectors that chase people? What does the financial act we have in the country say?
There are so many factors that leads to that. We've seen that in most instances, issues about cronyism, nepotism, favoritism, tribalism were the order of the day. So credits were not given to people who have the capacity and ability to pay, but rather they were just given to friends and loved ones. And at the end of the day, payment becomes an issue. Most at times to political influence. Most of these, I may say, natives banks were formalized or formed based on a political agenda, motives. So a lot of them were being influenced by politicians. So they were not going into banking sector in order to make an impact in our local economy, but they have a secret political agenda and political motive. So at the end of the day, if you've given the credit out your political cronies, your apparatchiks, at the end of the day, if the table turns upside down, then you find yourself wanting. And the other issue too is about the processes and procedures involved in appointing managers and directors of these institutions,
Yes, sir.
you realize that the processes are flawed, and most competent people were never given the opportunity to have a taste of leadership. And these most at times positions were given to friends and people who have no qualification at all. Or as Prof is saying, people who have dubious qualification. So at the end of the day, they ran the whole institution into a ditch. So it's an indictment of our failure. We want to develop our local industries. But the bigger question is, are we prepared, looking at this attitude and behaviors? So that I think is a caricature of problems that have engulfed
Doc,
us.
I'll read you a subtle defense on the part of Unibank in the lead up to this announcement. It was put under the, auspices of KPMG, and the administrator had this to say to government. The administrator of Unibank was asking government and its allied institutions to pay their debts owed the bank. And then by June 22, 2018, a letter was written and signed by Juan Simon Dono on behalf of KPMG to the finance minister. And the letter said government must pay the debts as early as possible. And as of May 31, government had to pay a whopping 868 million Ghana cedis to Unibank. So if the threshold, which is the minimum, capital requirement you should have is 400, and you owe this bank twice that, who is to blame? Is Unibank to blame, or it is the state that is to blame?
I think both parties they are equally guilty. And going forward, you realize that even the state knows that Unibank and their directors, they are not serious. Because most of the times, the processes and procedures in granting these credit facilities to even the state is fraudulent, because somebody wants us a favor. So at the end of the day, due processes were not followed. So the state knows where the loopholes are. So I think we need to be a bit serious. If really we want to solve problems, we need to be a bit serious.
Prof, do you suspect collusion, just as the doctor is talking about?
Very much so. In fact, I will not only stay at collusion, I will add connivance, agreement to cause crime. When we're talking about banking supervision, from the rules and regulators' point of view, they must be prepared to do what regulators do. They must go deeper. They have institutions that can help them to identify some of those loopholes in the system. So they have a duty. You don't just bring the rules and the regulations and then you go to sleep. You wake up and what you are regulating may not even be there. Then the corporate entities, the banks, also have to have respect for the rules and regulations. And in that case, we have a department known as compliance. To what extent do we comply with those rules and regulations that govern us? And use it as part of our strategy and our own internal rules and regulations, the do's and don'ts. Reverend refers to it as ethics. We can summarize it that way. Okay. The science of moral duties, obligations, not only the activities, but also going into the consequences of those activities.
Yes, sir.
Once the Ghanaian politician, whoever, knows that I can get away with it, something is wrong.
Okay.
We can summarize all these as good corporate governance. Key elements and factors and institutions are also pointing to institutional failure. Complete institutional failure. The reason why I say it is very good to see these things is that then we must take steps.
Prof, sorry for barging in. we have someone from the Bank of Ghana, Mr. Osejisi. Sir, thanks for making time.
You're welcome, sir.
To be fair to the Bank of Ghana, there is consensus around this table that there is some rot in the banking sector and something needs to be done urgently. But Ghanaians are asking, was yesterday's announcement not too sweeping and too harsh on indigenous banks?
Hello?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me, Mr. Jesse?
I can hear you. I can hear you, please.
Yeah.
I can hear you. If you
yes,
could
most Ghanaians are wondering
comment.
whether the countermeasures that are being put in place by the Bank of Ghana against indigenous banks, these countermeasures are a bit too harsh. Would you agree?
We have just one supervisory framework, and that supervisory framework is applicable to all banks. So we don't pick and choose. It is one framework that we're using, and that framework is applicable to all banks.
And some people are...
Much as we would want to see the presence of strong indigenous banks in the industry, at the same time, we would want to maintain standards and use a common supervisory framework across the industry.
To play a little bit of a devil's advocate, the 7 or so banks that have suffered this fate seem to be wholly Ghanaian. How come a few Nigerian banks that are operating in this country are immune to some of these measures?
Yes, we have said over and over again that for a bank to do very well, perform very well, and be robust, the bank must ensure that it complies with the framework, the legal framework that governs bank. That is the Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act. The bank must comply with regulations, rules that have been issued by the central bank. The bank must have in place a very robust and very good corporate governance systems and framework. If the banks ensure that these things are in place, the risk of the banks failing will be very low. So those banks that you made mention of are doing very well. What it means is that they are playing by the rules. They have very strong corporate governance systems. Their credit administration standards are very high. They comply with the rules and regulations issued by the central bank. But if you're a bank and you ignore all these things, whether you are from Nigeria, you are from the UK, you are from Trinidad, Tobago, wherever, you have challenges. And that is what it means.
Okay. Unibank, a very popular bank, is one of the 5 in the latest, sweeping measures you and other leaders of the central bank have taken. But in the past 4 months, KPMG had been the administrator, so to speak, for Unibank. And we read that as of May 31 this year, Unibank owed the state owed Unibank a whopping 868 million Ghana cedis and some change. So won't you blame the state for taking Unibank where it finds itself today?
I don't know about the figure that you just mentioned. I don't know about that. What I know is that Unibank had some interim payment certificates, what we call IPCs, interim payment certificates. And it refers to certificates in connection with jobs done by contractors on behalf of government, in respect of which the contractors had borrowed from Unibank for the execution of those contracts. And the government has acknowledged that those jobs had been done. But as to the amount involved, I'm not in a position to tell. And that is it. And as to whether that contributed to the present situation in which Unibank, the defunct Unibank finds itself also under that thing. What I'm saying is that I acknowledge the fact that there were ITCs in respect of contracts executed on behalf of government, in respect of which Unibank funded the contract, and government would have to give them some money. But I'm not in a position to speak to the amounts that you mentioned and as to whether that is the cause of the liquidation.
And finally, I would ask this on behalf of our viewers. For people who have been saving with these banks, where do they move from here? Because we had reports earlier today that ATM machines for some of those banks were a bit defunct and non-functional. How do people cash their checks? Where do clients or customers of these banks go from here?
If you listen to the press release, it was stated clearly that depositors should not panic, and that their deposit or their monies are safe. What it means is that all the depositors of the defunct 5 banks, their monies will be with the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited, and they can access those monies. As part of the process, it was indicated to customers that ATMs and banking halls will become accessible at 1 p.m. today. And as we speak, I think business is ongoing across all the branches of Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited. That is the position. There may be a few problems, one here and there, a few programs here and there, but the most important thing is that at the end of the day, deposited funds are safe. And as part of the process, I think the ATMs were also shut down. And it was indicated that by 1 p.m. the ATMs will be down.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Osei-Gyesi. He's with Ghana Central Bank, the Bank of Ghana. Thanks for making time with us. Prof,
hello, are you there?
Is it that Nigerians are more law-abiding than Ghanaians? Because even earlier today, there was a report that Access Bank has become the first bank to reach the threshold of the minimum capital requirement. Where have we gone wrong as a people?
Oh, we have gone wrong in many dimensions. You know, normally it is the net benefit and the effect on the growth of the economy that is maybe the most effective factor or index you can use. We haven't been doing well. Our per capita GDP is only $1,500, when our competitors, they are doing 57,000 per capita income. We are getting it wrong.
But Nigeria isn't any better economy.
No, but they are complying. You see, it's a matter of compliance. First and foremost, we have the capital aspect, which Basel II has emphasized, and Central Bank is doing it, is trying. They need to strengthen their surveillance on these banks. Second, the bank itself is making sure that they follow the rules and the regulations and play it right, so that in this context, Basel III becomes very important. The personnel. So you have the capital, the personnel, the administrative aspects of management. And hidden in that is the respect for the rules and the regulations that you have. That is why I see something really good in this rot that is coming out, at least we know. Now, you have mentioned Unibank. The summary of the causes of failure is that Unibank has a capital deficit of 7.4 billion compared to the regulatory minimum of 400 million. Now, if you run a deficit, it means what is coming in as against what you have advanced is to the tune of that. But basically, what is the destination of these monies? And if, for instance, is for projects, it means we haven't adequately prepared for those projects, the management of which demands procurement of labor, of materials, of whatever that you need. It also means that maybe the due diligence hasn't been carried through to run a deficit of this nature. For instance, when we look at the basic market structure of Ghana, we have the very top level where monies move from governments to governments. When these monies move, market is created. If you borrow, you have to pay back, and so on and so forth. Then we have another market where it is the government and the contractors who are in that market. If you are a government and you are doing a project, and therefore the achievement of the objectives of the project is leading to huge borrowing, which you are not going to pay back. Many of these contractors would have borrowed from these banks, third party, and they are losing. So the discipline of government is also important. And then the third market is where the private businessmen interface with government institutions and so on and so forth. That market is very small in Ghana. The last market is the informal sector. It's a huge market there. Ghana has money. But they are with the informal sector. It's not easy to access them. So the little monies that we have, if we run a deficit of this type, it's good that these things are coming out for us to know that that is the extent to which the lack of consistency in the various markets and our own ability to use money for the purposes for which they are to be used, in addition to honor the terms of agreement. I personally believe that in Ghana, and many a time, people are swindlers. They swindle. They'll get the money. They don't want to pay back.
Prof, in the age of social media, you hardly do things and get away with them.
That's right.
I'll read you something that may shock you. You know, we are a nation of awards and accolades, and the banking sector is no stranger to some of these award schemes. I'll run by you results of the 2017 Ghana Banking Awards. And please listen to the categories and the banks there. Customer care, the Royal Bank. Advisory services, the Royal Bank. Long-term or mortgage finance, the Royal Bank. And the first runner-up was Unibank Ghana. Household and retail finance, the Royal Bank. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing, Unibank came up as the first runner-up. Product innovation, Unibank. Corporate social responsibility, Unibank was the first runner-up. Bank growth, the Royal Bank. International accounting consulting firm KPMG was the independent analyzer, and the evaluations were based on an objective and transparent methodology with a large sample. So, Prof, these are the things we have on the books. But what we have on the ground is like they are poles apart. So maybe I would go to doctor. Doc, it's like your child. The terminal reports keep indicating it's one of the first 3 students or pupils. Then the child brings assignments or homework and the person cannot perform. Doesn't it come to you as a surprise?
Thank you very much. There is this saying that decorated monkey is still a monkey. And you realize that there has been some form of fraudulent activities going on, to the extent that people have been hired to even present their financial statement, annual financial statement, to project these banks to look good. So their books are looking good through fraudulent means. But then in actual terms, you realize that these banks have really collapsed on the grounds. So people pay just to get these awards, and that is what we have been doing. We never train our people to work within the international accounting standards. They never work within the accounting framework. They never put prudence measures in place as far as utilization of resources are concerned. So this is where we have come. Sycophancy at the highest level. So one day you...
So would you call these award schemes Ponzi schemes that we shouldn't repose our confidence in?
Exactly, and we shouldn't pay heed to all these kind of awards, because we are talking about the actual impact, not this kind of awards. And most of the time they do this just to deceive the public, to be able to win people's interest into these banks. So it's a scheme, it's a grand scheme. And all these awardees of these awards, equally needs to be arrested. We need to arrest them if really we are a serious country, and interrogate them. The reason why they have chopped all these successes, but then in actual terms, no.
No, but for an award like this, such results would not have been arbitrary. It would have been as a result of a painstaking vetting process, looking at the books and records and all that.
Again, it boils down to institutional failure. Maybe I wouldn't say those, shall I call them referees, should be arrested unless they are culpable of the crime. If Royal Bank, from what you have read, and I recall them, then how come about 80% of their
Debts,
loans are non-performing? Or maybe they gave part of what went into the loan to those referees,
event organizers,
the evaluators, to see them coming up so strongly. One would have to ask those questions.
So, Prof,
but
would you say
when
for us to avoid such shenanigans and wholesale deceit of the public, would you say that BOG should pass legislation for any award scheme that happens? It should be under the aegis of the Bank of Ghana, so there will be transparency, fairness, and truthfulness in the process.
Oh, I think that is asking Bank of Ghana. You are expanding their mandate then. You are giving them additional
responsibilities.
But I'm not too sure there. But you see, one of the things that deceives those who do the evaluation is that when you give wrong information to them, which they use to do the evaluation, the books look good. There's so much rot under it. And then mentioning Unibank, we are in deficit of 7.4 billion. Jesus Christ. You need only 400 million minimum capital adequacy as a requirement for you. And you are running such a huge deficit. And then you are winning left. The true winners will never win. In Ghana, those who really kill themselves to support the system we have, they will never win. That is what, there was one case, I don't want to mention the institution because I'm not very too sure now, but if it was not ISA, where they did some awards, and then the award didn't exist in the list, but they got somebody to be winning that award. So the real killers, the real very hard-working people, they don't belong to the big boys and girls. So why should they win award? That is what is coming out. It's like the one who has been demolished by Professor Azuma. And then you say he is the winner, but the guy is on the floor. That's good refereeing. You get the one. You can see it. But this one, what you are saying, is all rot they have put on the paper, which boils down again to the rules and regulations. Ensure that they are followed. And you, the corporate, you must comply to the rules.
And Doc, if Prof says we shouldn't overburden BOG when it comes to looking at the quality assurance and standards of some of these award schemes, would you advocate for a temporary ban on these awards until we make sense of what is happening in the banking sector? Because some of the organizers, the event organizers, are just generic events organizers. They don't have expertise in the areas that they organize awards in.
We are managing the economy.
Or they have that expertise, that is if you know.
Yeah, we are managing the economy like it's something like entertainment. So we are not actually managing it like experts. Now, Prof is talking about not burdening the Bank of Ghana with additional oversight responsibilities. It's good, but then when you listen to the officer from the Bank of Ghana, you quite realize that he made mention of compliance, he made mention of supervision. Now you host us here, but you have a producer who monitors and makes sure that the right thing is done. The Bank of Ghana is the one in charge of compliance. It's not the bank. It's just like to say that God is taking the Israelites from Egyptian captivity, and in the wilderness, God asked the children of God to make laws for themselves. If you were to be there, what kind of laws will you make for yourself?
Laws that would suit you.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. But he called the leader and gave him laws so that there will be sanity. Bank of Ghana has really woefully failed us. And that is what he must admit. They are the cause of all this problem. How can you give a license without compliance? Putting monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place, that the right thing is done. And so people get a license and whatever they want to do is done. At the end of the day, no accountability, corruption here and there.
But so far, one good thing about this is that we've not heard of any criminal case of money laundering. Have we?
Even if
No,
there's
you
one.
see, this whole idea of money laundering thing is only one aspect of crime or criminal activity. You have misrepresented yourself. You have cooked records, data, figures. That is fraud, is fraudulent. That is enough crime. And these people must be given to the CIDs to invite them. You see, I still make the point. You know, Klitgard, one expert in the area of crime, especially corruption, he said that once citizens know that they can get away with it, that system has failed. Because there are so many people in this country, what work did they do to declare the kind of wealth that they mention, the richest person and so on and so forth, in this country? What did they do? And some of these whole ideas of asset declaration. In China, when you steal, they cut your hand. It's a bit too brutal, but they are using it to achieve something. In Ghana, when you steal money, they say you are smart. Yes. But if you are a young little boy, you steal goat, you go for 25 years.
Exactly. So we celebrate those who
There's
steal.
too much rot. And it's good that at least Bank of Ghana.
To ask you whether you think, because this rot cuts across residual rot from the former administration, of these banks actually started operating in the past 1.5 years or so. Would you say the fact that because of lack of continuum in government projects, contracts that were given out and people raising LCs, letters of credit, but then these contracts have been ground to a halt, so therefore the level of liquidity that is needed to keep these banks afloat could also be blamed on the winner-takes-all syndrome we have in Ghana?
Exactly. If prudent measures are not put in place and we are not working in accordance with policies and programs, at the end of the day, these the kind of results that will be seen. And I think that who police the police, the government should be able, the president should be able to take certain actions now, commission an inquiry and to investigate the modalities, the roles and the functions of Bank of Ghana for the past 10 years. Then we'll be able to get somewhere. If you allow Bank of Ghana itself to continue doing everything, at the end of the day, we will be going merry-go-round.
Prof, I'll ask you, you belong to a much older generation. You'd always go to the banking hall and queue.
20 years old.
But technology has made transfer of money quite easy, and dampening people's appetite to go and queue in a banking hall. What role do you think MOMO, the mobile money system, could it have been the cause partially of the lack of patronage of banks to warrant the kind of distress these banks now find themselves in? Because MTN declared, and it's not only MTN, Airtel, Vodafone, Tigo and others do it, when they declare how much money, the quantum of transfers that are made from mobile device to another, perhaps that could have also taken a toll on the banking sector. Would you agree?
Not really. You know, the shadow banking is an institution of itself. Monies run around, they are within the system, and in fact, they are very compliant. If you joke there, some people they are selling, they receive their money by mobile money. The money must hit the account before they release the good to you. So they are not joking at all. You can't go to somebody and transfer all these monies. It's not possible. Maybe if there are new tricky ways of getting the monies moving, I don't know about that. But the quantum of business they do is very well regulated. They are not going to use some piece of paper and write different figures when the actual transaction is a different number. It will be what you electronically release that will, and with Android, you get it exactly the time. It is noted there. Now, in terms of tradition,
15, 20 years ago, if you had to send money from Legon, where you were lecturing in the business school, to a relative in the village, there were means of doing that. But now, you actually don't have to go to a bank. You don't need a branch in the village for you to do the transfer. You do it on your mobile phone. Has that not taken away some of the luster and the allure of the banking sector?
Well, you know, that rather maybe is what the banks will have to do more and more, in the sense that I will not send money if I don't have the money. I can't just send paper money. I must actually have the money, like maybe it's 50 cedis I want to send to the village. It is 50 cedis I must have. It's 1 million or 100 Ghana cedis, and then I pay 1 cedi as business service. So that charge will be there and it will go. If you don't send it, they will take that 1 cedi from that 1 million you have sent. So I would say that it's a bit too difficult for me to say that maybe some additional research may bring some ideas about.
Doctor, have these directors and MDs of these banks, is it that they ran out of ideas, they weren't innovative enough apart from compliance, to keep up with the Joneses? If Access, GT, and other banks have been able to meet the standards, how about our own directors of the banks we have, the indigenous ones? Weren't they innovative enough?
Thank you very much. I think we need some form of financial engineering, and we need to overhaul our entire system. And I think our cultural backgrounds equally contributed to a very large extent. You realize that we are too relaxed, and we have not been brought up very well. I continue to say that when you look at our
Reverend.
Curriculum very well in the universities, we are lacking something. That is why you see us graduating graduates, but then there is no morality. So at the end of the day, some becomes crooks. Some simply becomes crooks, and these are the people who takes a leadership position. So it's a recipe for disaster. And some too, they don't want to embrace and employ technology. Now technology has changed society. So we are moving away from monopolistic market to a perfect competitive market.
Okay.
And we need that kind of financial innovation.
Okay.
So until you have been able to adjust, you will not be able to fit for the match.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making time. We had in the studio Professor Cletus Dodono, an economist and chairman of Claydod Consult. Sir, thank you so much for making time. And we also had Reverend Dr. Samuel Mensah, a chartered economist. Sir, thank you so much.
I'm so grateful.
You catch a repeat of this program on Monday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So we come your way next Thursday with another edition. Stay blessed and keep watching GTV.
I was the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to gain independence. Ghana, free forever.
Defined by integrity, sovereignty, a common ethos, discipline, and shared values, and beyond age.